Hi everyone, my name is Michael DeLuca. I am currently enrolled in the Grand Canyon University Master of Arts and in Autism Spectrum Disorders, and so I'm here to share my action research project with you all, and I'm very excited to do so with you all. And so the topic I wanted to focus on throughout this 6-week process was the topic of inclusion. I believe inclusion is such a hot topic right now in schools because some school districts are doing inclusion, some aren't, and so coming from a teacher who, as a teacher who teaches self-contained preschool with kids who have autism and special needs, I believe inclusion is such an important topic to talk about, and an important topic for kids to know about, and how to show that throughout our school day, and how to implement inclusion correctly within the classroom. And so my brief description of the action plan I'm proposing to you all is to minimize the learning gap between our students and our inclusion classrooms, between our typically developing students and our kids who receive student services. As in my school, there's self-contained classrooms, and then there's inclusion classrooms. I really want to focus on the inclusion classrooms because there's such a gap. I know from talking to colleagues who teach inclusion, notice there's such a gap between our special ed students and our typical students. And so I really wanted to focus on how to really hone in and really find ways on how to minimize it and for everyone to somewhat be on the same level as everyone. And so that's what I wanted to propose was to minimize the learning gap of students in preschool, but with this you can definitely use it from K to 12, but just use it to your own learning. And so the data that I used to create this action plan was due to the pandemic and us being virtual and all that stuff. The only really way I could hold data was to hold interviews with colleagues of mine. And so I interviewed 3 teachers, one teacher who teaches inclusion all day long, who has been there for approximately 20 years. And then my second teacher was a teacher who taught self-contained and inclusion, but now is teaching resource. And what resource basically is they pull out those special ed students in the inclusion classrooms and work one-on-one, work on social and academic goals out of the classroom and in the classroom. And then my third teacher was a teacher who taught inclusion previously, but recently she's been teaching self-contained. And so throughout all that data, I have seen one big concept of between all 3 was that they support inclusion, and they do whatever in their position to make the students do whatever they can. Especially with my inclusion teacher, we talked about the collaboration, because the collaboration between your speech therapist, your occupational therapist, and your assistants is such a big component in your learning, because as a team you all got to be on the same page, and if you're not on the same page, it's not going to be successful. And we talked about how much we value inclusion, and with our self-contained teacher, she sees potential in her students and she pushes them out to inclusion teachers. And then with our resource teacher, she has seen both sides, self-contained and pushing kids into inclusion, and then has taught inclusion and pulled out students in inclusion as well. And so the stakeholders that were part of this huge data was me as the researcher, me as the researcher, the lead teacher, the assistants, the speech therapist, the occupational therapist, and the physical therapist. And so our first task task in our timeline was to interview those parents and teachers and see, how do you feel as a parent, with a student who is typical or who receives services, and interview how their experience is. What can we change? What can you change? What do you like about it? And and so forth. And so with that, we would definitely collaborate after that and see how we would move from there. And then that would take about interviews would be the first thing we do, and so that would be given a week. And then our second task would be implementing the techniques discussed by me and the team to implement in the classroom. And then our third task, and that second task will take about a week. 2 weeks, because 1 week of data is not sufficient. 2 weeks will be plenty of data for us to look at, see how we worked with our two populations, and see if there was any change or any really successes within those 2 weeks. And then the third task would be having that collaboration with everyone and seeing what went well, what didn't go well, what can we improve, look at the data from the academics, look at the data from the therapists, see how they are doing, and then go from there. And so that'd be the first day after that 2 week period. And then our fourth and final task would be implementing those final techniques we discussed in our collaboration and seeing how they did. And then after that task, we would look at that data, see if there's any if there'd be any learning gap that was minimized, and see how we can bring that to our other classrooms. And so some of the outcomes, some of the expected outcomes of this is for students to most definitely feel comfortable throughout all of this. We want our students to feel school as a safe haven and for them to themselves and let them shine over that. And as well, like, I have teachers who've been teaching there for years and really don't have a full topic of inclusion. And so my outcome as a researcher would be for teachers to have a better definition and an experience in inclusion, because, as said before, every school, every classroom has their own way of doing inclusion. And so if I can talk about those techniques that I talked about, show the data of them minimizing the gap, would be phenomenal for me to witness. And obviously my second outcome would be for my students who receive special services is for their scores to increase and for them to be closer to our typically developing students, because that's my whole goal, is for them to increase in academics and in social emotional ways. And so that is my action plan for all of you. I really hope you all enjoyed this, and I really hope you can take into consideration of really focusing on inclusion in your classrooms and really focusing in on the special ed students. Thank you.